The farmer guided his mule slowly through the dying light, the wagon wheels groaning across the dry earth. The woman leaned against a folded blanket, pain throbbing from her leg with every bump. Her long black hair clung to her face, streaked with dust and sweat. She tried not to cry out. The man's eyes stayed fixed on the trail ahead, his jaw tight with concern. The desert wind blew cold, carrying the smell of sage and sand. Neither spoke for a long time, but something passed between them, the quiet understanding of two souls, long acquainted with loneliness. By the time they reached his small homestead, dusk had swallowed the land. The cabin was plain, built from weathered boards and years of patience. A single oil lamp glowed inside. He lifted her down gently, careful not to jar her leg. "Ain't much, but it's home," he said. She nodded faintly, her voice lost to exhaustion. He carried her to a cot by the fire and fetched a basin of water. His hands were rough, the hands of a man who'd built everything he owned. Yet when he washed the dirt from her wound, his touch was unexpectedly gentle. She winced as he cleaned the gash and wrapped it tight with linen torn from an old flour sack. "You'll mend," he said, almost to himself. She studied him in the flickering light, the lined face, the streaks of grey in his beard, eyes tired but kind. "Thank you," she whispered. "Name's Eli," he replied quietly. "Ain't no doctor, but I've fixed worse." He set the bandage and stirred the fire higher. "Rest now." She lay back, the flames dancing across the walls. For the first time in days, she closed her eyes without fear of what the night might bring. When dawn broke, the world smelled of coffee and dust. Eli was already outside, tending to his mule and feeding the chickens that scratched at the dry earth. She watched through the open door, her legs stiff but slightly better. The air was cool and bright, the kind of morning that promised hard work but not cruelty. He came in with a tin cup and handed her coffee. "Ain't much sugar left," he said. She took it with both hands, the heat seeping into her palms. "It's good," she said softly. "You talk better than most I've met," he said with a faint smile. Days passed slowly on the lonely farm. Eli worked the fields while she stayed inside, trying to move her leg bit by bit. Each night he cooked beans or cornmeal, and they shared quiet meals by lamplight. She told him her name, Allah, meaning sunrise in her tongue. "Pretty name," he said once. "Belongs to strong folk." She smiled a little shyly. "My mother said it'd bring light." Sometimes she would hum low songs from her tribe, and Eli would listen without a word, staring into the fire as if the melody was mending something inside him too. One evening, a storm rolled in from the west, black clouds tumbling across the sky. The wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls. Eli limped to the door, anxious for the horses tied outside. Eli grabbed his coat and went after them. Rain came in fierce sheets, drumming against the roof. Through the thunder, she saw him struggling with the reins, refusing to let the frightened animals break free. When he finally returned, soaked to the bone, she was waiting with a towel and a blanket. "You could die," she scolded softly. He laughed, water dripping from his hat. "Wouldn't be the first time I nearly did." That night, as lightning flashed beyond the window, Allah sat by the fire, stitching a tear in his coat. Eli watched her quietly. "You sew fine," he said. "My wife used to mend like that." The words hung in the air before he could take them back. She looked up gently. "Your wife?" He nodded. "Lost her to fever long time ago." Silence settled again, heavy but not bitter. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," he said. "Some folks just pass on before their story's done." He stared into the flames, and Isla thought she saw tears hidden behind the firelight. By morning, the storm had cleared, leaving the land washed clean and new. Isla stepped outside, testing her leg. It ached, but she could stand. Eli smiled from the porch. "Reckon you'll be walking on it proper soon." She nodded. "Because you helped," he shrugged. "Because you didn't quit." She laughed softly, the sound surprising them both. It had been months since she'd felt laughter in her chest. They spent the day mending fences and gathering branches scattered by the wind. Though she still limped, she insisted on helping. "You got more grit than most men I know," Eli said, shaking his head. That evening, he showed her how to bake bread in the iron stove. the cabin filled with the warm, sweet scent of flour and wood smoke. She watched his hands knead the dough steady and strong. "You live alone long time?" she asked. "Too long," he said quietly. "World moves on without me, I guess." She looked at him, understanding that loneliness was its own kind of wound. Slow, deep, invisible. "In my people," she said softly, "we say no one belongs to the wind. Everyone belongs to someone." Eli met her gaze, the corner of his mouth lifting. Maybe that's true. As her leg healed, Alla began to walk farther each day. She fetched water, fed the chickens, and helped harvest the last of the wheat. The two of them worked side by side beneath the wide sky, speaking less and saying more. One afternoon, while repairing a broken gate, Eli paused to wipe sweat from his brow. "When your leg's strong, you'll want to head home," he said carefully. "Your people must be worrying." She hesitated. "My tribe gone north? I don't know where." The silence that followed was thick with things neither dared to say. "Then you can stay a while," he said finally. Autumn came quietly to the plains. The grass turned gold and the nights grew cool. Ayla's leg had healed enough for her to ride again. Eli fixed an old saddle, tightening every strap with care. She watched him, heart caught between gratitude and sorrow. "You helped me walk, now you help me go," she said softly. "That's what decent folks do," he replied. He helped her onto the horse, steadying her by the reins. "Where will you go?" he asked. "Where the sun rise," she answered. He nodded slowly. "Then may it rise kind." She looked down at him, eyes shimmering. It already did. She rode east, the horizon glowing pink with dawn. Eli stood watching until she vanished into the light. The land felt emptier than before, but different too, alive somehow. Days later, he still found himself listening for the sound of hooves in the distance, half believing she might return. Sometimes, when the wind swept across the fields, he thought he heard her soft humming carried through the wheat. And though he never saw her again, the lonely farmer knew one truth. The desert gives little, but what it gives, kindness, courage, or love, it gives forever. For many weeks after she rode away, the cabin felt emptier than the desert itself. Eli woke before sunrise each day, feeding the mule, tending the fields, and pretending the silence didn't weigh on him. He still left an extra cup on the table each morning, out of habit, though no one came to share his coffee. Some nights, when the wind moved through the wheat, he imagined it carrying her voice, soft, foreign, like the whisper of a dream that fades before dawn. He told himself she was gone for good, but deep down, he never quite believed it. One summer evening, as the sun bled over the horizon, Eli heard hooves approaching. His heart jumped before he could stop it. He stepped onto the porch, hands shading his eyes. A rider appeared from the heat-hazed distance. Not her horse, not her silhouette, but someone else. It was a soldier, dusty and sharp-eyed. "You Eli Carter?" the man asked. "That's me," Eli said carefully. "You seen an Apache woman traveling alone? Injured, maybe?" Eli's jaw tightened. "Can't say I have." The soldier studied him, suspicion in his face. "She's wanted," he said. "For what?" Eli asked. "For being Apache," came the cold reply. After the soldier rode off, Eli sat by the fire long into the night. He thought of Alla's quiet smile, the way her eyes had softened when she looked at the sunrise. Wanted for being Apache. The words burned through him like whiskey and anger. He'd seen hate before, knew it didn't care about guilt or innocence. Outside, the fields rustled softly in the wind, and he made a silent promise to himself. If she ever came back, he'd protect her, no matter the cost. The West didn't have many good men left, but he could still try to be one. Autumn came early that year. The wheat ripened golden, and the air turned crisp with the scent of harvest. Eli was in the field when he saw movement at the edge of the trees. His pulse quickened. A horse stood there, nervous and thin, and beside it, her, Ayla. Her hair was longer, her face weary, but her eyes were the same, bright and strong. She dismounted slowly, favoring her healed leg. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said, voice rough with disbelief. "I had nowhere else to go," she answered softly. "Soldiers?" "They took my people." Her voice cracked like brittle leaves. He led her inside without another word. He sat near the fire while he brought water and bread. The room filled with quiet again, but it was a different kind, heavier, more fragile. "You safe here?" he said finally. "Ain't nobody comes this far without reason," she nodded, eyes glistening. "You kind man, Eli Carter, but kindness is danger now." He looked at her, something like defiance in his gaze. "Let 'em come," he said. "I ain't hiding from what's right." For the first time in weeks, Ayla smiled, small, uncertain, but real. Outside, the wind began to rise again. Days turned into a rhythm neither of them spoke about. She helped him grind corn, mend fences, and gather firewood. At night, she sat by the fire humming songs he didn't understand, but somehow felt deep in his bones. Sometimes she would tell stories in broken English of her father, her tribe, the rivers and stars she missed. Eli listened, saying little, yet his eyes never left her face. "You should run far," he said one night. "Go west, maybe cross the border." She shook her head. "West has no mercy either," she said. "Better to stand than to run again." One morning, smoke rose from beyond the ridge. Not farm smoke, but dark, heavy, moving fast. Eli's stomach sank. He climbed the hill and saw 3 riders in military coats coming down the trail. "Damn," he muttered. He ran back to the cabin. "They're coming," he said. Alla's face went pale, but her voice was steady. "Then we hide." He shook his head. "No, you hide. I'll handle it." She grabbed his arm, eyes fierce. "They kill anyone who help us." He met her gaze. "Then I'll die honest." She wanted to argue, but there was no time. The riders were near. When the soldiers arrived, Eli stood outside, arms crossed, pretending calm. The leader dismounted. "You again," he said, the same man who'd come weeks before. "I told you she was seen this way." Eli shrugged. "Ain't seen no one but the mule." The man's eyes narrowed. "Mind if we look around?" Eli's voice hardened. "I do mind." The soldier's hand drifted to his holster. "You got something to hide, farmer?" Eli didn't move. "Only my peace, and you're disturbing it." For a long second, no one breathed. Then the soldier smirked. "Search the barn," he ordered. Eli's hand twitched toward the rifle leaning by the porch. Inside the barn, Alla crouched behind hay bales, her heart thundering. The boots and spurs clanged closer. She clutched a pitchfork, ready to fight if she must. Outside, Eli stepped forward. "Leave it," he said sharply. The soldier turned. "What did you say?" Eli's voice dropped low. "I said leave it. Ain't nothing here but dust." The soldier sneered. "We'll see." As he turned back, Eli grabbed the rifle. A single shot cracked through the air, echoing across the fields. The soldier staggered and fell. The others reached for their guns. 2 flashes, 2 roars, and then silence. Smoke drifted in the fading light. Eli stood shaking, the rifle still warm in his hands. He'd killed before, long ago in the war, but it had never felt like this. Cold and necessary. Ayla emerged slowly, eyes wide with shock and sorrow. "They'll come," she whispered. "More will come," he nodded grimly. "Then we ride tonight." Within an hour they packed what little they could, water, bread, a blanket. Eli saddled both horses. As they rode out under the rising moon, the farm faded behind them, swallowed by darkness. The wheat whispered in the wind, a final goodbye to the only home either of them had ever known. For days, they traveled across the plains, sleeping beneath stars and moving by dawn. Ayla's leg ached, but she never complained. Eli's shoulders stayed square, his gaze scanning every ridge for pursuit. Somewhere between exhaustion and silence, they found something like peace. 2 outcasts bound by chance, by loss, by a kind of quiet love neither dared to name. On the 6th morning they reached the mountains, high, wild, untamed. "We can hide here a while," he said. She nodded, eyes shining in the pale light. "Not hide," she whispered. "Live." He looked at her then and smiled. "Live it is." As spring warmed the valleys, they built a small shelter by the river. The world seemed to forget them, and they were glad for it. She taught him Apache words, Tusa for sun, Nia for heart. He taught her how to plant corn, how to fix a roof before the rain. Nights were filled with firelight and soft laughter. But sometimes, When the wind blew from the east, Eli would still turn, half expecting to see soldiers cresting the ridge. Allah would lay a hand on his arm and whisper, "No more fear, only life," and for once he believed her. Years passed quietly, measured not by calendars but by seasons, harvests, winters, and the songs of birds returning each spring. Their hair grew silver, their hearts steady as the rivers flow. The world beyond the mountains changed, but it never touched them again. Sometimes Eli would stand at the door at sunrise, watching the light break over the land, remembering the day he found her broken and alone. "Guess we both needed saving," he'd say, smiling softly. From behind him, Ella's voice would answer, warm as sunlight, "And we found it, here." The wind would carry their laughter through the valley, forever free.